Go get your welfare from TANF, you poor thing. With those words, the two of them left the house. I felt drained and just sat down right there. I remembered what my husband Mike had said earlier. You are definitely independent, but I've always felt like my pride as a man was being hurt. I want to build a future with your sister Nancy now. So, I want a divorce. It all seemed meaningless, and I signed the divorce papers to express my intention to divorce. Sometime later, I had a meeting with both of them, with a lawyer present, to discuss the compensation I demanded. Shamelessly, my sister Nancy, who was not involved, demanded a share of the assets. But then, the lawyer burst out laughing. "Isn't TANF for you?" he said. "What?" Taken aback by the sudden turn of events, she was also surprised and exclaimed. Immediately after, seeing the documents the lawyer had placed on the table, Nancy turned pale. "My name is Sally. Mike and I have been married for 18 years. I am 45 years old, and he is 3 years younger, at 42. We have one daughter, Lisa, who is currently 17 years old and in the 10th grade. She is approaching an important period with her exams next year. We met through work. I worked at a real estate company, and Mike worked at a related company. We hit it off over something minor and started going out in our private time. He is very sensitive and often struggles to make decisions. Back then, I found his indecisiveness cute and was attracted to him. I wanted to take care of him. Purely out of affection. That was also because I have a much younger brother. At first, I saw him as a brother and took care of him, but gradually, I was drawn to his more masculine aspects. That led to serious dating and eventually marriage. Mike was always indecisive, but he was the one who confessed and proposed to me. In those moments that required a decision, he always stepped up. That's why I felt I could marry him and be okay. And we did, going on to have Lisa and never experiencing a serious fight or a crisis of divorce. Once Lisa grew up, I thought we would start our second life as a couple. That's what I had believed. "Sally, can I just stay here for a bit?" My sister Nancy said this as she showed up unannounced with a huge suitcase. I have a brother and a sister. The woman standing in front of me was my sister, Nancy. Perhaps because of the age difference, I got along well with my brother. But I've always had a difficult relationship with her, who is a year older. Being shorter than Nancy, I always ended up with her hand-me-downs. Feeling sorry for me, when my parents bought me a new toy. "I want one too. Give me yours," Nancy would say, taking the new doll I received and giving me her old, worn-out doll in return. Her bullying didn't stop there. Taking things was the lesser evil. Once we were in elementary school, she took all my friends, and when I got my first boyfriend in high school, she seduced him away from me. I hated her so much that I chose a different college just to avoid her, but she still interfered, ruining what should have been a fun college life. I still hate her to this day. I'd prefer not to have anything to do with her. So, I studied hard, got my real estate certification, and lived a life where I wouldn't have to see Nancy. Mike and I decided to have a small wedding, just the two of us, a photo wedding. My parents knew Nancy's character, so they kept my marriage a secret, yet here she was. I had hoped that once Lisa went to college, Mike and I would finally have some time for ourselves. "Sally, you live in such a nice house. Is it a single-family home? Did you buy it?" "Oh, there's a room available here. I'll use this one." Nancy's irritating voice brought me back to reality. "Hey, this is a problem." "What do you mean by showing up unannounced?" "My husband and daughter live here too, you can't just move in." Ignoring my words, she began to inspect the house. Today was a holiday, but Lisa was out for a course. and Mike had been out since the morning for work. "Could you please leave before they come back?" I pleaded multiple times, but she wouldn't listen. And finally, in the evening, the two of them came home. "Who is this?" To Mike, who looked puzzled, Nancy greeted him with a charm that belied her 46 years. "Nice to meet you, I'm Nancy. Sally's sister. When did you get married without telling me?" "I had no idea because there was no greeting or report. I was just bored and went to visit our childhood home and found your wedding photo in Mom's room by accident. It's terrible, isn't it? Even though we're sisters." Mike knew I had a sister. So, perhaps realizing she was exactly as he had heard, he looked a bit troubled. But I didn't miss it. Mike, looking enchanted by the beautiful Nancy. And Lisa, too, had a confused look on her face when she came home. No wonder. An aunt she had never met suddenly showed up at our house. But she pushed forward with the idea of moving in. "Actually, I was fired from my job, and it's been hard to come up with rent and living expenses, so I was wondering if I could stay for a little while." "Maybe it's okay for a little bit?" "Eh? But no." Lisa is facing an important time with her exams next year. I tried to say this, but the two of them didn't listen to my words and got excited on their own. "Actually, I had heard about you from Sally." "Oh, that's fine. You were probably just going along with Sally avoiding me, right? Sorry for being such a sister." From here, a tumultuous daily life begins. Nancy doesn't do any housework but keeps asking for money, and eventually starts taking cash from my wallet. This happened within just 1 week of she moving in to live with us. I've warned her about this several times, but she wouldn't listen. "Hey, if you want money, at least tell me what you're buying or why you need it. Don't just take it from my wallet." "Why do I have to report to you what I'm buying?" "Because it's my money." I wish she would start job hunting and move out soon since she was fired. But it doesn't seem like she's looking for a job, and lately, Mike and Nancy seem to have the same times of absence. Mike said he was working overtime, but there was never any overtime pay included in his salary. When I complained about it, "The salary isn't supposed to include overtime, is it? You have to get paid for the overtime separately. If you can't say it, shall I say it for you?" "Huh? Are you doubting me? The overtime is paid separately, so there's no problem." Mike, who was usually gentle and rarely raised his voice, shouted. This was a shock in itself, because he was not someone who would argue emotionally or suddenly start yelling. From this point on, I started to feel a crisis in our current life. As usual, Nancy only lazed around at home, costing more money than what we spend on our daughter Lisa, which only made me sigh. I consulted my parents about this. They apologized for their lack of oversight, which led Nancy to find out about my marriage and our current home. But the fault wasn't with my parents. I had moved away from my dear parents to live quietly with Mike and Lisa, yet Nancy clung to me, even going so far as to find out where we lived. She must have been preparing to find out where we lived the moment she found the wedding photo of Mike and me. Surely, she must be planning to take something from me again and make me unhappy. I've even started to doubt whether she was really fired from her job. Maybe she quit her job on purpose to freeload off me and ruin my life. That's what it's starting to feel like. If that's the case, I need to kick her out of the house as soon as possible. You say you were fired, but can't you get unemployment benefits? Well, I've always been part-time, so I'm really struggling. I could have gone back to my parents, but I can't expect my elderly parents to take care of me, right? So, as the independent Sally, it's your responsibility as a sister. That's just common sense. Faced with such nonsensical remarks, I was at a loss for words. Nancy, after dropping out of college, has been working part-time ever since and has never worked as a full-time employee. After being confronted with the fact, I realized job hunting wasn't going well for a reason. 3 months after Nancy started freeloading, I finally caught them cheating. I had been suspicious for a while, but seeing it was true was another thing. One day, when a client meeting was canceled and I was killing time at a cafe, I saw Nancy and Mike walking together outside. They were holding hands and chatting happily. A brother and his sister-in-law holding hands like that just isn't something that happens. In that moment, I was sure they were cheating. Sometime later, once my feelings had settled, I confronted them at home. "So, the overtime was a lie, huh? Nancy, you've just been pretending to job hunt while hanging out with Mike. The worst. Even at this age, you can't be satisfied without taking something from me? That's why I kept my marriage to Mike a secret." When I let my emotions burst and poured out my feelings, they easily admitted to the affair. Then they started saying things that were even more infuriating. If I had known such a beautiful woman was my sister-in-law, I wouldn't have believed Sally and avoided you. You're definitely independent, but I've always felt like my pride as a man was being hurt. I want to build a future with Nancy now. So, let's get a divorce. He shoved divorce papers already filled out in his part at me. Fine. At this point, reconciliation is absolutely impossible. Nancy, Mike, from now on, I won't be taking care of you financially, so just be prepared for that, I declared, and Nancy burst into laughter, saying something outrageous. "Go get your welfare from TNF, you poor thing." What? What are they even talking about? As I was wondering, a smirking Mike started saying something even more appalling. "Yeah, that's right. Since custody usually favors the mother, right? I think it's better for Sally, as the mother, to be with our daughter. The rest is up to you." With those words, the two of them left the house. Some 10 minutes later, Lisa came home and was puzzled by the quietness of the house. So, I honestly told her that we were getting a divorce. Lisa was shocked at first, but seemed to accept the situation somewhat relieved after a while. Eventually, the divorce was finalized. I decided to have a discussion with both of them, accompanied by a lawyer I hired to claim compensation. Shamelessly, Nancy demanded a division of assets. But then, the lawyer burst out laughing. "Isn't TANF for you?" he said. "What?" Taken aback by the sudden turn of events, Nancy was also surprised and exclaimed. Immediately after, Nancy turned pale when she saw the documents the lawyer had placed on the table. "There's no money for a division of assets with this couple," the lawyer said, looking shocked between Mike and me. Of course, Mike was also surprised, being told there was hardly any assets left. Anticipating this, I had taken action as soon as I caught Mike and Nancy cheating. Therefore, the cash we had between us was only $10,000. For a couple that had been married for 18 years, that amount is unbelievably low. "Hey, what's this about? We had lots of savings, didn't we?" Mike, completely clueless about what was happening, asked in panic. Seeing him like that, anger welled up in me. "You really have no interest in Lisa, do you? I told you, didn't I? The savings I've accumulated so far were for education, and I was thinking of transferring them to her account. You said, do whatever you want. So, I transferred all my savings to her account. Almost all my savings were for education. You should know that better than anyone. She's managing her money herself, and even paid gift tax, so it's no longer our savings," I said with a cold expression, and Mike's face turned pale as he remembered the conversation. So, what's the breakdown of the $10,000? I think about 80% of it is your secret stash. When I said that, Mike looked at me with a face that seemed to ask how I knew. So, you knew about it. That's why you transferred your savings to Lisa, anticipating the division of assets? You agreed to it. Look, you even signed the consent form yourself. Mike then became angry. I thought it was strange. Why would you ask for my agreement just for that? Mike said, ruffling his head, clearly regretting his decision, but since he had signed it himself, there was no turning back now. Even after consulting with a lawyer, it was explained that since Mike had agreed and made the gift to Lisa, the money was no longer considered marital savings. I didn't want such people to get the money I had been saving for Lisa. That's when I thought of making a living donation. Hearing this, Nancy looked stunned but managed to say to Mike, "Hey, you said we had plenty of savings. Weren't we supposed to live a luxurious life? Dividing $10,000 isn't going to amount to much. Why didn't you realize her intentions sooner?" She blamed Mike, but he just looked away and remained silent. He had a small salary and was burdened with a substantial amount of student loans, so for a while after getting married, he hardly contributed to the living expenses. But that was agreed upon. When Mike said it was difficult for him to contribute to the living expenses, I said, "Understood. I'll take care of all the living expenses. So could you focus on saving as much as possible for our future?" So, for over a decade since I took over all the living expenses, I thought Mike had been able to save at least $100,000 or more, but in reality, it was only about $10,000. I had thought saving would be easy since he didn't have to pay for living expenses, but he was splurging behind my back. I found out the savings amount when I saw Mike's banking app and felt betrayed, though I hoped maybe he had saved properly in another account. But that hope was also betrayed, and since I had divorced him, it didn't matter anymore. Nancy, finally understanding the severity of the situation, was in despair, her body trembling slightly. She seemed to be trying hard to think of what to do next, but apparently came up with nothing. Knowing that the cash available for division was only $10,000, I decided to tell Nancy another truth. I turned my gaze towards Mike and said, "I debated whether to say this, but Mike, aren't you planning to quit your job?" Suddenly, Mike, who had been avoiding my gaze, looked at me. Mike, visibly rattled, shifted his eyes left and right before exclaiming, "How do you know I'm planning to quit my job? I had only discussed it with the boss. I thought so after seeing the paycheck." What I pointed out was the fact that no overtime was paid, but I was actually puzzled by another item: the paid leave. Mike, who had quit a job in real estate to work for a construction company, had never taken more than 5 days of paid leave. Yet, recently, his pay slips showed that he had used up his paid leave in a lump sum. Taking a bunch of paid leave at once suggests quitting. Since then, I had been suspicious of their affair and thought maybe Mike planned to quit his job after divorcing me, thinking he would get a substantial amount of assets. That he would actually go through with such an overly optimistic plan made me sigh. You were my husband at one point. You should know what kind of work I do and how much wealth I've built up. To rely on that for an affair and to choose to quit is really short-sighted." As I said this, Mike's face turned red. The lawyer's mention of TANF to Nancy meant, in essence, that if both of them were unemployed, that's where they'd end up without jobs. Faced with another fact, Nancy was panicked but soon shouted as if she had realized something. "Wait. If you can prepare for Lisa's college tuition and cover living expenses by yourself, there must be something fishy. I got it. You're hiding assets, aren't you? That's it. Come on, confess already." Hearing Nancy's words, Mike also seemed to have a realization. That's right. Nancy, actually, Sally owns a lot of real estate, so we have to divide that as property. That was close, nearly got trapped. Real estate is a significant asset, so we need to split it evenly. You've been acting all high and mighty, but you're using underhanded tactics too. As I watched the two of them laughing, the lawyer finally couldn't help but laugh. The moment became tense. The lawyer cleared his throat and began to speak matter-of-factly. If you're going to talk about property division, you should study more. Mike, as the ex-husband, should know that Sally owns real estate as a business and is making a profit. A corporation and an individual are separate. Her company is her separate property and cannot be divided. Realizing the lawyer was correct, the two of them blushed and froze. The lawyer continued. Typical assets would include cars, houses, cash, and savings. Furthermore, Mike and Nancy have essentially admitted to the affair. So, Sally can claim compensation from you both. We'll claim $10,000 from Mike and $3,000 from Nancy. Their faces contorted at that. Isn't that too much? It was just a few months' affair. Right. Normally, it wouldn't cost $10,000, would it? They started making excuses. But I immediately countered. Oh, who decided that? Market rates are just that, rates. You took paid leave to date Nancy, and Nancy didn't seriously job hunt but played with my money. The lawyer objectively assessed these facts and came up with this amount. What, would you have preferred a higher amount? They quickly shook their heads. The discussion didn't conclude that day and was adjourned. However, I felt a firm sense of progress. 2 weeks later, we set up another meeting. Somehow Nancy had become defiant, saying, "Give me the house and the car. It's part of the property division. I'll give Mike's $10,000 and pay the remaining $1,000, okay?" Her ridiculous claim almost made me yell in anger, but I managed to control myself and calmly assessed the situation. The house still had a mortgage, and I had to maintain it every time something happened. So, it would have some value if sold. Even the car, bought new, is only 5 years old. Both still have value, yet accepting Nancy's argument would only result in my loss. That's the last thing I want. Nancy, did you do the math? If you included the money from selling the house and car, you couldn't possibly say that. Generally, such talks are for those who cheated, like Nancy, not for me to say. How presumptuous can one be? I thought so, but before I could continue, Mike, who was beside Nancy, started saying, "Sally has assets worth $160 million at the company, right? I don't know if you're some real estate mogul or what, but being so greedy even with all those assets is just too much." I was taken aback for a moment, but their words and actions were so absurd that I burst into laughter. Given the situation, my sudden laughter made both of them freeze. After a good laugh, I became serious again. "Is that all you wanted to say? And why are you playing the victim? Greedy? I'd rather be greedy than give money to a man who cheats and abandons his daughter and to the worst sister who steals her brother-in-law. It's better for me to secure as much as possible for Lisa." The two of them flinched. As the lawyer said in our last meeting, if you want to use legal terms, you better study more. What on earth made Nancy think she could say that? I planned to shatter their schemes bit by bit. "Mike, the house is in my name, right? I know that, but we've lived together all this time. So what? I took out a mortgage and bought it before we were married. No matter what you do, it's my property. The car was bought new, has no accidents or violations. If you want to take it, pay me half the appraisal value. That's the rule for property division. I own 2 cars. One is the new car we're discussing, and the other is a used compact car. But the latter would hardly be worth anything. But the lawyer said, no, cars are part of the property division. Did Nancy just believe that without thinking? That's not what it meant. Look, the lawyer was only talking about the main things that could be part of the property division, not that they will be in this case. The only things we need to divide between us are the $10,000 combining Mike's secret savings and my savings, and the 2 cars. That's all. Nancy knew nothing. Of course, Mike hadn't thought it through either, and this oversight put them back in a pinch. He seemed to ponder for a while but eventually became clueless and pleaded with me. Please, just give us enough money to start a new life. I beg you. But he didn't seem remorseful. It just seemed like a plea to solve the immediate problem. Such shallow words are worthless to me. I answered with a heart of stone. It seems like you wouldn't want to pay Lisa's child support anyway, so there's no room for compromise. Why should I worry about your living expenses? Saying this clearly, the 2 of them signed the documents, realizing that nothing they said would make me agree. After the divorce and property division were settled, Nancy kept calling me persistently. Hey! Why did Mike have so much debt? You were paying for the living expenses, right? Then what's the point of the debt? What's going on here? She was screaming on the other side of the phone. I told her the plain facts while holding back a sigh. Isn't it obvious by now? The fact that after over a decade, there was only about $1,000 in savings when it came out. Does having debt while having savings mean you took out a card loan for some big purchase or something? When I asked incredulously, Nancy earnestly explained the situation to the point of drawing back. Yes. He took out a $1,000 loan just to buy some nonsensical branded goods. And then the credit card payments turned out to be a huge mess because it was set to revolving payments without us knowing. This man, he's not just a problem debtor. How dare you push such a person onto me? Weren't you the one who stole him, Nancy? I retorted with a half-smile, and Nancy fell silent. Mike had incurred debts without even me knowing. Now, after the fact, several dunning letters have arrived. He must have hidden them while with me, but became careless after changing addresses. Or perhaps, typical of Mike, he got caught up in his new life and forgot to hide them. Just figure it out yourselves, I said and hung up. Eventually, Mike called, complaining about the high taxes for the car he took and not expecting the vehicle registration renewal fees to be so high, stating the obvious. Maintaining a car costs this much, huh? It's tough, so can't you take it back? I refuse. I curtly declined, and he hung up, seemingly dejected. After that, he reached out through messages asking for help, but I warned. If you keep pestering me like this, I'll report you to the police for stalking. And then he stopped coming altogether. What lies ahead for them is probably a hell much worse than hell itself. Later on, it seems Mike and Nancy got divorced. Their marriage lasted only 3 months after divorcing me. Their plans must have been thrown into disarray the moment it was clear that the single-family home, in my name, was not subject to division. Starting a marriage while burdened with debt and compensation payments was never going to work. Their divorce proceedings were apparently even more contentious than with me. Nancy is someone who clings to money. Sell the new car. It's a waste to keep something like this. It'd be better to cash it in, right? I don't care about that money. Besides, I paid the compensation in full, so if we're divorcing, you need to pay me back. They were stuck in such trivial arguments, unable to divorce for a while. Eventually, they did divorce, but Mike chose to file for bankruptcy. Since the compensation was paid in full and recovered, it didn't affect me. However, he ended up unemployed, devoid of assets, and ultimately fell into homelessness. He couldn't take back quitting his job and left the company. His useless pride prevented him from applying for TANF. Now, he's likely living a miserable life, doing something akin to begging. Divine retribution caught up with Nancy. After stealing my husband and cheating, her 3-month marriage became widely known, and her social relationships collapsed. Naturally, she was disowned by her family and relatives. No company would want to hire someone like her, so her job search continues to be difficult. She might get hired as a part-timer, but with a terrible attitude of blaming others and not herself, she's quickly fired. The lawyer's words that TANF is for you became a reality, and now Nancy is desperately trying to receive TANF. But because she continues to hold on to anything that might be worth money, she hasn't been able to receive TANF and was evicted from her apartment, ending up like Mike. Trampling not only on my feelings but also on Lisa's, such punishment is only natural. Now, it's just the two of us living, but our days haven't changed much. Mike, who never did anything for Lisa yet always complained, telling her to study or go to a good university, is gone, and Lisa says she feels refreshed. And impressively, she was accepted into a national university. Seeing Lisa about to become a college student this fall, I am once again moved. Work keeps me very busy in a good way, and though I'm nearly 46, I'm still in good health. I think to myself that I must keep working harder. My husband, Charles, tells me he's going to marry the woman he's been seeing and asks for a divorce. Let's not waste time with property division, just leave quickly. Sharon taunts me, as if she's relishing in my misery. Donald, too, is infatuated with a woman he met at a bar. They don't want to live with me. I'll leave, just as you wish. But before that, I'll give you a piece of my mind. My name is Joy Lynn. Named with the hope of being blessed with much joy, Joy and Joy Lynn, I am a 50-year-old woman whose life hasn't been as joyful as I'd hoped. But now my days are filled with happiness, so I can look back and laugh at the past. Let me take you back to when I was 35. I was about to celebrate my 10th wedding anniversary with Charles. We hadn't been blessed with children, and I found it somewhat painful to hear comments from those around us like, "Do you have any kids? And children are wonderful, you know." Conversations with Charles had dwindled, partly because he had been promoted a few years earlier, became busier with work, and traveled frequently. I was working too, so we hardly saw each other. No wonder we didn't have children. Well, this too is a form of marriage, and it's easier on our minds. Having children or not, it doesn't matter. That's what I thought. One day, our family grew in a way we hadn't expected. It wasn't an angelic baby that arrived. Instead, it was a parents-in-law that seemed like a demon from hell. Apparently, right after we got married, the parents-in-law had been constantly telling Charles that they wanted to live with us. Charles weighed the hassle of living together against the hassle of continually refusing. As a result, he decided that living together would be less of a hassle. Surprisingly rational, or not. Hey, I didn't agree to live together. According to Charles, I'm hardly ever home, so it's fine. It might be fine for you. But still, as Charles said, it's fine. If the parents-in-law are good people. I had a hard time with these parents-in-law even before we started living together. They were the ones who persistently asked me, "When are you having kids?" Sharon would always say, "The more children you have, the better," every time we met. But you only gave birth to Charles, right? Living with such parents-in-law, it's a stomach-churning story. I wonder how living together will turn out. My expectations were quickly betrayed. Not in a good way. It turned out even worse than I thought. Donald solemnly declared as we started living together. We won't give you any pension or living expenses. Then Sharon continued with a smile. Let's go with that arrangement. Wait, what kind of arrangement is that? Charles also said something like, we both work, so we can manage without receiving living expenses. So Charles is one of them, too. I had never been particularly dissatisfied with Charles until now. I didn't expect much from a husband even before we got married. I thought a husband who doesn't get angry easily and works hard was good enough. But now, a wave of complaints that I never had before came rushing in. Moreover, as I lived with the parents-in-law for a while, I gradually understood the real reason they wanted to live with us. Donald would often go out somewhere at night. I believed him when he said he was going out to drink with friends. But then, I found a point card from what you'd call a nightclub and a business card with Nancy written on it in the laundry. There are various types of bars, but this was clearly a service industry that directly satisfies a man's desires. I see, he likes Nancy. I can't believe he's still so energetic at his age. I thought. Of course, I meant it in a bad way. No wonder he can't give us living expenses, he's spending it on Nancy. It can't be helped. No way. On the other hand, Sharon gradually started to harass me. Moreover, she was cunning and intensified the harassment gradually, so much so that even I didn't notice at first. At first, I thought she was being kind. I could have endured it if it had just been about the way I fold laundry or season my cooking, but there were times when Sharon called me by the name of Charles's ex-girlfriend. Every time, Sharon would apologize, saying, I remember her strongly because she was the first girlfriend Charles introduced me to. I didn't do it on purpose. I'm sorry. At first, I thought, Sharon is old, so maybe such things happen. But as it continued, I realized something was off. Speaking of which, every time I took a shower, the bathroom was always dirty. I initially thought the mess in the bathroom was from Charles and the others who had gone in before, but no one complained about the bathroom being dirty. So, without a doubt, it must have been Sharon who was in before me. There were other instances too, like when Sharon, mistakenly thinking everyone had already bathed on a snowy day, unplugged the bathtub, leaving me to shower in the freezing cold. She also once took my favorite necklace from the closet without asking and then lost it. Each time, Sharon would say, I didn't do it on purpose. I just wasn't thinking. I'm sorry. While it's possible to accidentally shower or call someone by the wrong name, taking jewelry without permission is not something that can be brushed off as a mere oversight. I began to suspect that maybe this was all intentional harassment aimed at me. When I saw Sharon angrily sitting at the dining table saying, My dinner is late because Joylyn came home late, I finally realized it was indeed harassment, albeit subtle. Come to think of it, Sharon hasn't done any housework since she came to our home. She throws her socks inside out into the laundry and tosses bottles into the trash without removing the labels, adding minor inconveniences every time. She complains if meals and if the sheets are messy, and sometimes she even throws things. I finally understood. Our home was indeed graced by the arrival of a baby. 2 of them, in fact, both big and delightfully stubborn. Exhausted from my job as a caregiver, all I wanted was to quickly escape this situation and go to bed, so I kept silently tolerating Sharon's behavior. I didn't have the energy to argue with anyone when I returned home. I wanted to rest as quickly as possible, even if it was just for a moment. While I was exhausted and didn't notice at first, It seemed that Sharon knew about Donald's night outings. When an actress appeared on TV, Sharon persistently asked Donald, "Donald, don't you like girls like her?" "You do, don't you?" The actress's name was Nancy. The same as the girl from the bar. Donald looked pale. After that incident, I asked Sharon once, "Are you okay with Donald going out like that?" Sharon replied, "If I get a divorce, I'll be someone who has a divorce history at this age, right? That's miserable, and it looks bad to society. Of course, I don't like it. But he's just playing with professionals at the bar, right? If he's not serious, I can accept it." She wasn't holding back from divorce because of her concern for Donald, but rather she feared becoming someone with a history of divorce. I couldn't understand it. Turning a blind eye to infidelity must be causing her significant internal stress. And Sharon's outlet for that stress was harassing me. By harassing me, not only could she vent her stress, but she could also avoid doing housework. It was like killing two birds with one stone. I was certain. I knew why Sharon had insisted on living with Charles. Since living with the parents-in-law, Charles increasingly made excuses not to come home, saying he had to work overtime. This house was rotten from the roots to the pillars. At this rate, even I might end up crushed under the rotten floorboards. It happened one day, about 6 months after we started living together. Charles, who rarely had the same day off, said something unexpected. "Please, let's get a divorce." It was a bolt from the blue. It turns out, Charles had been having an affair with a classmate for a long time. He even said he wanted to marry this person, and I had no clue. Apparently, they started dating just before he got promoted. I thought he was working hard for our sake, but could it have been for his classmate? Was it my fault for not paying attention to Charles's behavior, using my exhaustion as an excuse? I thought affairs only happened on TV and to people like Donald. No, maybe it's natural for Charles to cheat, given that Donald does it too. "Once this house is ready, my girlfriend and I are moving in. You can take your things and leave," Charles declared. Sharon asked, "What's going to happen to us?" "You can stay, my girlfriend doesn't mind sharing," Charles responded. "What a nice girl. Joylyn, don't let her get away with it if she asks for property division. We're going to use this house and everything in it." Donald chimed in. "Yeah, she's really a good girl. Especially if she's cuter than Joylyn." Sharon shot Donald a look as if to say, "There you go again with women." But Charles and Donald just laughed. "These people are hopeless." I replied, "All right. I'm fine with a divorce. There's a memorial ceremony in Atlanta soon, right? Can you wait until then? Planning on enjoying the feast at the memorial ceremony, are you?" How pathetic. There's no way I'm taking a woman who's divorcing me. Just leave already. Who's the pathetic one here? Who cares about the food? Despite everything, Sharon and I, the only women in the room and both cheated on, can't seem to get along. No, I was planning to move out on that day. Going back home is a bit embarrassing since I was cheated on. Finding a place and handling the paperwork takes time. I thought it would work out around then. Charles, not Sharon, replied condescendingly, "If that's the case, fine. Cheating and then acting all high and mighty. Don't underestimate me. I'll destroy everything." A week passed, and the long-awaited day of revenge finally arrived. That day, my parents-in-law and Charles left the house early in the morning to attend a memorial ceremony in Atlanta. They planned to return by evening. All right then. Let's give it a try. The garbage collection service I had hired arrived. I had them load all the furniture in the house into the truck. The sofa, The microwave? Charles and parents-in-law's bed, and Sharon's clothes that had accumulated since moving in? Charles's favorite new vacuum cleaner? Even the refrigerator and its contents? All of it gone. Ah, minimalism is wonderful. With each item thrown away, it felt like my troubles were disappearing. Next, the movers came to transport my important belongings to my new place. By evening, the house was empty. The front door made a sound. It seemed Charles and the others had returned. I decided to greet them one last time as a good wife and stood at the entrance with a smile. "What, you're still here?" Charles frowned openly. So did my parents-in-law. "Oh, that's harsh. It's the last time, so it's fine to see each other's faces before leaving, right?" "I wanted to see your face." "Huh? You still care about me?" Charles blushes slightly. He chuckles. "What's the big deal?" "Fine. Let's have a meal together one last time, shall we?" Charles, strangely in a good mood, heads towards the living room saying this, followed by Sharon, who looks exasperated, saying, "Charles is so sweet." Donald, on the other hand, turns to me with a proud look, saying, "That's my son." I'm baffled. Having a meal, huh? Would have been a nice way to part if there was anything left to eat. Huh? What? What? Ah! Understanding the meaning of my words, Charles, upon opening the living room door, lets out a silent exclamation. Sharon, annoyed, peeks into the living room after Charles and exclaims just like him. "What? Ah!" Donald does the same. "Wah, wait, Joylyn, WHY, the fridge, no, even the furniture. Appliances too. Why is there nothing anywhere?" Of course, I threw them out. The house feels much bigger now, doesn't it? I thought it would be bad to leave old furniture for your new life with your girlfriend. Consider it my parting gift. Threw them out. Why? Weren't you preparing to move? I've already moved. You throw away things you don't need when you move, right? Have you forgotten? Most of the things we bought when we got married were purchased with my money. Nothing bad will happen just because I, who didn't need them, threw them away. At my words, Charles points at me, his mouth moving but no words coming out. He seems too shocked to speak. With this, I'll forego any division of property. Well, there's hardly anything to divide anyway. Sharon, furious at my smile, says, "What have you done?" I'll return that phrase to your foolish son. There are limits to indecency, like cheating while having a wife and then saying to leave because you're remarrying. Wasn't your upbringing at fault? How could you speak to me like that? You are such a terrible daughter-in-law. Do you still consider yourself my mother-in-law? To me, you're just another old lady. I speak with a malicious smile, and Sharon mutters, "So ungracious." Shaking with anger. It's a secret that seeing Sharon angry is starting to be a bit fun. Don't you remember? If I ask for a division of this house, you can't refuse, can you? Without the house, where would you two strangers live? You sold your family home, right? Yes, the PILs had sold their house when they moved in with us. We won't need it anymore, they had said. So, this house was absolutely necessary for them. They sided with their son's affair over his wife, probably thinking, as long as there's a house with a housemaid, anything goes. Hearing my words, perhaps feeling rushed, Donald intervenes. Well, let's settle this amicably, pretending to be a good person. Yes, let's do that. Let's proceed calmly, just like the old just like Donald suggests. Exactly, you know what I'm talking about, Joylyn. Of course. By the way, Donald, wasn't your cell phone broken today? Huh? Oh, yeah. I realized it after leaving the house, it wouldn't turn on. If charging doesn't work, I guess I'll have to consult the store. There's no need for that. Your cell phone is right here. Saying that, I pulled Donald's cell phone from my pocket. Huh? Two identical phones? What's going on? Donald is puzzled. I switched the phones just before you left today. The one I have is the real one, and the one you had is a used one I bought and removed the battery. So, it won't turn on. What? Since you aren't tech savvy, I thought you'd just give up easily thinking it's broken or out of battery. It seems like a huge success. Smiling, I get asked by Donald. Why would you do that? Why, you wonder? Well, I have no clue. Speaking of which, you received an email today from your beloved Nancy saying she had a good time the other day. You email each other daily, right? I'm so jealous of your close friendship. What? Donald gasps, while Sharon glares at him. So, Donald, you were out with Nancy the other day? Woohoo! More lovey-dovey than with Sharon. But you should put a lock on your phone if you're cheating. You'll get caught easily. See, stop it, Joylyn, this. But I thought cheating is wrong. Charles cheated on me, and it hurt. I know exactly how Sharon feels. So, I did something nice at the end. I texted Nancy. I'm bored. Let's break up. She was furious. I was just dealing with this old man because he conveniently gives me money. Good thing you broke up safely. Oh, by the way, this is Nancy, Sharon. Your enemy, take a good look. Saying that, I showed everyone a photo of Nancy and Donald as I returned the phone. That's when it happened. Charles showed a stern expression no one had seen before. Why? My girlfriend is. What? Everyone but Charles gasped. What's going on, Charles? What are you to Nancy? No, that's my line, Dad. Why are you taking pictures with Nancy? Because I'm her boyfriend, obviously. No, Nancy is my girlfriend. Isn't your girlfriend your classmate? We just met at a bar and started hanging out. Who would have thought that father and son were dating the same person? This development was also surprising for me. Ignoring Sharon and me, who were in shock, the men started a pointless argument about who was more suitable to be Nancy's boyfriend, which eventually escalated to a full-blown brawl, pulling each other's hair. The brawl ended when Charles pulled out a significant amount of Donald's precious, thinning hair. After a glance at the soulless face of Donald, I loudly declared, "Well, I'm off to my new place. Thank you for everything. I'll be claiming compensation for the affair next time. Bye." I had said there would be no property division, but I didn't mention compensation. Sharon realized that this was a serious affair and, swinging the bag she was holding, began furiously beating Donald in a rage. Donald stood there, head hung low, as if he had burnt out completely, unable to process everything happening all at once. Watching this living hell unfold beside me, I couldn't stop smiling as I hopped on my beloved scooter and left the scene. Although it's a far stretch, in my mind, I felt like Tom Cruise in Top Gun. Oh, it's been a while since I've ridden down such a refreshing night road. This is the best. Later on, when I proposed divorce, including the alimony, Charles said, "Please wait on the divorce." It seems that Sharon is also considering divorce, and there is a possibility that everyone might lose their homes or their circumstances might change, so he wants to save as much money as possible. He said things like, "Don't you think it's pitiful for us, who once lived together to face such a difficult situation? And we need money now, but I didn't care, so I proceeded with the divorce talks without discussion and took as much money as I could get from Charles and his affair partner. When claiming the alimony, I felt a bit like an outlaw, but I hadn't done anything wrong. I had just done what was natural. Well, maybe tampering with someone's phone was slightly wrong. In the end, around the same time as our divorce, it seemed that Sharon also divorced Donald. Apparently, Donald and Nancy's affair had been going on for over 5 years, and Sharon couldn't forgive that they had a relationship in private as well. I don't quite understand why bar hopping is forgivable but private relationships aren't. I thought there are various forms of marriage. Well, in the end, we're not married anymore anyway. Donald was sued for alimony by Sharon, and Charles was sued for alimony by me, so the saying blood will out held true, and the parents-in-law are now all scattered. Sharon, having been cheated on by Donald, seemed to have grown to despise men in general, including Charles, who had abandoned me in a similar manner. As a result, Charles and Sharon, after her divorce, are slowly becoming distant, though they do have minimal conversations. Donald, jobless, turned to Charles for help but was rejected, as Charles himself was barely scraping by. Charles is juggling multiple jobs, while Sharon, who had been a housewife since her early marriage, is experiencing work for the first time with a part-time job. Donald became a part-time worker living in a cheap hotel. Charles, eager to remarry Nancy, learned that she wasn't interested. Nancy saw both Charles and Donald as mere extensions of her bar work, as convenient sources of money. It turned out that Nancy had other men besides Charles in the same capacity. Charles, having been classmates with her, mistook her for being serious and believed she was his destiny. But in reality, it was a foolish and trivial story. In the end, both men were deemed unnecessary by Nancy, even as convenient sources of money, and were discarded. From my perspective, I thought, since I'm leaving, might as well destroy everything in the process. Just as I aimed. I'm very satisfied having witnessed this spectacular collapse of a family. No one in that family valued each other, only caring about themselves. So, the outcome was, in a way, inevitable. Essentially, they were a family in name only, lacking any compassion. Now, I think it was good that I got away from that household. On the other hand, while I still come home exhausted from work every day, living alone has freed up my time as I no longer need to allocate it for someone else. I have more freedom than when I was married. Back when I was married, I hardly had time to meet my college friends, but now I can travel with them on my days off and even have time for my hobbies. In college, I was part of the choir, so I decided to join a karaoke club. It seems that one can continue to improve in music, no matter the age. I consistently win at the club's competitions and even earn cash prizes. Thanks to that, my wallet is always warmly filled. Hee hee. At the facility where I work, my colleagues suggested hosting a karaoke recreation event since I'm good at it, and it was a huge hit. I received many compliments like "you're so good," and was thrilled to bring smiles to the residents through my personal hobby, something I hadn't expected. By the way, my go-to performances are Unchained Melody and My Heart Will Go On. The lyrics of older songs are just so wonderful. I don't really understand recent songs, but I guess I should study up. Though my days aren't glamorous, I'm surrounded by friendly colleagues, trustworthy friends, and kind residents who feel like family beyond work boundaries. Finally, it seems like I've become the Joylyn I was meant to be. From now on, I aim to be someone who not only receives joy, but also shares it with others. All right. Let's do our best at work today. I'll wholeheartedly celebrate the residents' birthdays. Being broke and useless is grounds for divorce. So said Matthew as he left the divorce papers on the table and walked out. I was left staring at those papers, dumbfounded, on my hospital bed. I had my suspicions for a while. But, to think he was actually cheating. And he's leaving me because I'm useless and can't earn money while hospitalized and because Alyson's pregnant? Mom? Startled, I looked up to find my precious son Harlan and my dad standing there. My dad looked at what I was holding and frowned. What are you going to do? There's only one thing to do. With some persuasion, I managed an early discharge and headed to the bank where Matthew works. My dad, who drove me there, cheered me on. You can do it. Then he dropped me off in front of the bank and drove away. As I entered the bank, Matthew, noticing me, frowned. Coincidentally, there were no other customers in front of Matthew. I approached him directly. I'm closing all the company accounts. What? Let's show him whose daughter he's angered. While Matthew turned pale, I couldn't help but smirk. I am Sabrina, a 32-year-old corporate executive and mother of one. I have a 7-year-old son named Harlan and my husband's name is Matthew. Matthew and I met at a party thrown by mutual friends during our college days. Back then, we had no interest in each other and merely exchanged contact information. Hey, weren't you at that party? Sabrina, right? Oh, Matthew? The following year, by coincidence, I used the bank where he worked and we reconnected. That led to us keeping in touch regularly and eventually started dating. After I got pregnant with Harlan, we got married. Matthew was known for his serious and meticulous work, which made my friends envy that I had him as my husband. I, too, was happy to have married him. Mom, why does this become this? Hold on a sec. I don't know that much myself, so I'll look into it. Okay. Harlan, perhaps inheriting traits from Matthew, is studious and curious. He's always asking questions, which keeps me on my toes with my own studies. What's this? Why? Surprisingly, Harlan's admiration is not for Matthew but for my dad. My mother passed away from illness, and my dad, despite his busy work life, raised me as a single parent. I'm sorry, but it's hard to get along with your dad. Well, it can't be helped, but don't say that to him. He's quite sensitive about it. No way, I could. My dad is a kind man but looks intimidating and somewhat scary. Matthew is also not comfortable around him due to his appearance. My dad, aware of this, has always tried not to interfere too much. Thus, our life was peaceful at the beginning, a life that seemed full of promise. But that changed drastically after we got married. Hey! Where did you put my mobile phone? Don't say it like I'm responsible for it. Isn't it still on the charger? Right after waking up, Matthew would ask grumpily. Indeed, his mobile phone was where he left it charging the night before. No apologies or thanks from him, just a click of his tongue, which irritated me. Matthew changed after we got married. And whenever he had the chance, he would say this. I'm an elite banker. Thanks to me, you're living a comfortable life. Yet Matthew doesn't contribute financially at home. He spends his entire salary on himself, yet acts as if he's supporting the household. In reality, I'm the one supporting our family. I pay for all the utilities and groceries. Hey! What's with these new clothes? They're for Harlan. He's outgrown his old ones. Don't spend my money on luxuries. I'm paying with my own salary. I don't even have access to your account. Yet, if I take Harlan out for a meal or buy new clothes, he immediately complains. He seems to dislike any form of luxury, no matter how small. On the other hand, my dad is the type of person who's willing to spend money for our sake. The apartment you're in now is too small, right? That's why I bought the condo you and Matthew wanted to live in. And it's not far from my place, so I could be close with you guys. He said, laughing, and gave us the top floor as a gift. And to be there for us in times of need, he lives on a different floor in the same building. Mom, can I go to Grandpa's? Of course, but just because it's the same building doesn't mean you can stay out late. Make sure you come back before it gets dark. Okay. It might be natural for Harlan to be closer to his grandfather than his father, Matthew. Whenever he has the chance, Harlan goes to see my dad. Where's Harlan? At Dad's place. Is that so? Matthew never complains about my dad to him directly. And it seems he's careful not to say too much around Harlan, fearing he might tell my dad. It's just me he's bold with. Certainly, I keep quiet not to trouble my dad. Well, if it's just complaints, I can ignore them. That's how lightly I thought of it as. And so unlike my dad, Matthew doesn't participate in childcare at all. I've been called out by Alyson, so I'm heading out. What? Again? And it's Matthew's childhood friend Alyson who's stealing away his time from childcare. I dislike her, more than just being uncomfortable around her. Matthew and I are like siblings. So please don't misunderstand. Every time she meets me, she would say something like that. Yet, she always tries to assert her dominance. Matthew used to be. As if she knows Matthew better than I do, which is just annoying. Valeria, Matthew's mother-in-law, also dotes on Alyson, which complicates things further. Why did Matthew choose such a woman instead of Alyson? He should have married Alyson. When called to my in-laws, Valeria made sure to say such things loud enough for me to hear. John, my father-in-law, always scolds her for it, but she doesn't seem to care. Alyson claims to be a natural airhead. I'm just a natural airhead, that's why I rely on Matthew so much. I don't mean to make Sabrina uncomfortable. This might be okay if she were younger. But she's 28, not exactly young. It's time she acted her age. The reason she and Matthew didn't end up together is because of John. I don't want such a woman even as an in-law. If it really comes down to it, I'll divorce you. Alyson can hardly be called as a good person. She's notorious for playing around with men and doesn't work either. Whatever she wants, she gets Matthew to buy for her. John despises Alyson and strongly opposed their relationship. I could never understand why Valeria adores Alyson so much. I'm sorry for my wife's behavior. It's not something you should apologize for, John. Matthew too. To not defend his wife from such remarks, and instead, being friendly with such a woman. True to John's words, no matter what Valeria says about me, Matthew never defends me. Sometimes, he even laughs. Why do you say those things, Grandma? If Mom and Dad hadn't met, I wouldn't be born. Does that mean I'm an unwanted child to you, Grandma? No, that's not true at all. Harlan always stands up for me in place of Matthew. Harlan may not understand how children are made, but he knows they can't be born without both parents. Valeria adores her brilliant grandson, so she refrains from making such remarks in front of Harlan. In that aspect, Valeria and Matthew are very alike, making it seem they really are related. I have plans to drink with Alyson tonight, so I'll be home late. Oh, really? Gradually, I started to wonder if Matthew was necessary for us at all. And I began preparing for divorce. Harlan seemed to sense something too. If there's anything I can help with, just let me know, he said, showing concern for me. Then, I was summoned by Valeria. I really didn't want to go, but she kept calling persistently enough that it would affect my work if I didn't show up. John is away on business, so there's no one to carry heavy things. Can you buy some rice? Apparently, John was on a business trip. I wanted to tell her to just order it online, but saying that would clearly lead to an argument. After being tasked with carrying heavy items after work, I was exhausted. As I was heading back to the condo in a daze, my body was thrown by a car. It seems a car that ran a red light hit me. The driver who hit you fled the scene, and we're currently investigating. I was informed while lying in a hospital bed. For now, I left Harlan in my father's care and decided to stay in the hospital for a while. I broke my arm, so I couldn't work properly in this state. When I was being worried about such things, my dad scolded me. first, worry about your own health. Harlan, my father, and John, who came back in a hurry after hearing about the accident, visited me frequently, but Matthew and Valeria did not visit me at all. Well, that was within my expectations. Coming in. What? So, I was surprised when Matthew showed up in my hospital room. Sign this. Matthew presented me with divorce papers. Already signed by him, with Valeria's name as a witness. With that arm, you won't be able to work. Now that you can't make money, you're useless to me. What is that supposed to mean? And besides, Alyson is pregnant with my child. My thoughts froze at those words. Alyson is pregnant with Matthew's child. I'm going to marry Alyson. So just sign this quickly. Saying that, Matthew turned his back on me. As if I was of no further use to him. Being broke and useless is grounds for divorce. Matthew said as he left the divorce papers on the table and walked out. I was left staring at those papers, dumbfounded, on my hospital bed. I had my suspicions for a while. But, to think he was actually cheating. And he's leaving me because I'm useless and can't earn money while hospitalized and because Alyson's pregnant? Mom? Startled, I looked up to find my precious son Harlan and my dad standing there. My dad looked at what I was holding and frowned. What are you going to do? There's only one thing to do. I answered while looking straight at my dad. My dad nodded in agreement. Well then, let's fight back. With some persuasion, I managed an early discharge and headed to the bank where Matthew works. My dad, who drove me there, cheered me on. You can do it. Then he dropped me off in front of the bank and drove away. As I entered the bank, Matthew, noticing me, frowned. Coincidentally, there were no other customers in front of Matthew. I approached him directly. I'm closing all the company accounts. What? Matthew's expression clearly said, what are you talking about? Without taking a number, I stood directly at the counter, noticing a few annoyed glances from others. Oh, excuse me. Maybe you didn't understand without the company name. What are you? I'm Sabrina Gibney. I recently took over my father and became the CEO. The company is Gibney Corporation. What the? Gibney Corporation is an IT company my father founded, now employing 1,900 staffs. And is quite well known in this area and within the industry due to its rapid growth in one generation. That's why Matthew was so surprised. That's a lie, right? You're just trying to get back at me. If you think so, why don't you check? Matthew started checking something immediately at my words. While he was busy, I looked around. Having mentioned the company name, the surrounding people were now paying attention to us. Oh my God, what? No way. It seemed he had confirmed it. Matthew looked up at me hesitantly. You're really from that Gibney Corporation? Let's show him whose daughter he has angered. Contrary to Matthew's pale face, I smirked unpleasantly. That's right, so please proceed with the cancellation quickly. Wait, if you cancel all at once like this. By the way, my father is quite angry about this matter as well. Quickly pack your things and leave the apartment. What? Why should I be the one to leave? It seems Matthew had forgotten that the apartment was purchased by my father, and the ownership was in my father's name. Otherwise, he wouldn't have brought Alyson in while I was hospitalized and still be living there. Forgot? That apartment was bought by my father, the former president. You haven't contributed any money, let alone for living expenses. You've been spending everything on your childhood friend and mistress, Alyson. In fact, you've been living on my salary. Who do you think has been supporting your lifestyle? Well, about that. And now, because she's pregnant, you expect me to hand over the apartment to you and your mistress? How much more do you intend to insult me? I made sure to speak loudly enough for those around to hear. And of course, Matthew was flustered. After all, he's known for being serious. That he, of all people, wouldn't contribute financially at home and was cheating with a childhood friend. The looks we received from those around us turned cold.
Is that true? What?
The one who approached me was Ogden, the branch manager of this bank. He had been here for a while, listening to our conversation. I believe we need to have a detailed discussion. I am very sorry for the inconvenience caused by our bank employee. And with that, Ogden offered a deep apology. Following this, I was taken to the back to discuss further with Matthew, Ogden, and myself. There, I explained the situation to Ogden in detail. I am terribly sorry for the trouble our employee has caused. Ogden sighed deeply and apologized again. Next to him, Matthew sat looking displeased, and to that, Ogden forcibly grabbed his head to make him apologize. I understand your feelings, Sabrina. It's natural not to want to entrust your money to a bank that employs such people. If you're considering closing your account, we can arrange that. I am no longer his wife. If you accept one condition, I might reconsider closing the account. The two of them looked up hopefully at my words. It was a good deal for Ogden, but the worst possible condition for Matthew. If you fire Matthew here, I would like to continue my contract with this bank.
What?
Of course. We were actually planning to let him go. It seemed Ogden had already intended to do so. Matthew, initially confused, gradually turned red in the face. As he was about to say something. Excuse me, but Sabrina's father has arrived. Another bank employee approached us. I had asked Ogden to let him in, thwarting Matthew, who, frustrated, closed his mouth. Why do I have to be here?
What? Mom?
Sorry for making you wait. Dad entered, firmly holding Valeria's arm. Valeria, looking displeased, glared at me upon seeing me.
This is your doing. What are you trying to accomplish? I'll never forgive you for treating your mother-in-law like this. Quiet.
As Valeria began to shout, my dad fiercely scolded her. Giving an even more intimidating look, he managed to silence them.
I know you've been harassing my daughter. Calling her for trivial tasks, making her carry heavy things. Despite this, instead of showing gratitude, you prefer to listen, and you made sure my daughter heard it. And Matthew, far from defending, laughed, and even Harlan had to step in to protect her.
My dad's angry voice echoed through the bank. Matthew tried to intervene but remained silent under my dad's stern gaze.
And I'm aware that Alyson is the one who hit Sabrina. That woman has already been arrested by the police.
Could Alyson really have done such a thing?
Why are you surprised? You're the mastermind.
My dad scolded at her even more. Meanwhile, Matthew, seemingly unaware, froze in shock.
What? You both are the worst. Sabrina, let's go.
Yes. Prompted by my dad, we headed outside. Ogden followed, apologizing repeatedly. Thinking I might continue the contract with Ogden in charge, we heard Matthew and Valeria arguing loudly behind us. It seemed they were blaming each other. Their voices could be heard outside, and the customers and bank employees who were present whispered that what they had heard was true.
Just as planned. Yes. They reacted just as we expected, which helped.
Our plan had gone smoothly, and we left the bank laughing confidently. As a result, Matthew was indeed fired. Thanks to the police conducting a thorough investigation, Alyson received a prison sentence. As for Valeria, she was forced to divorce John after it was discovered she had instigated Alyson to run me over in an attempt to get rid of me. Valeria was also taken into custody by the police. Welcome back, Mom, Grandpa. I'm home. Thank you for looking after Harlan, John. No problem. Seems like you've settled everything at the bank. After cornering Matthew and his accomplices at the bank, I went to pick up Harlan, whom I had left with John. John had helped a lot this time too. He found evidence that Valeria was instigating Alyson and discovered notes about their plan to eliminate me, which he handed over to the police. When I thanked him for everything, John said with a smile, "You did great. Since then, my days have become busier than ever. Being busy as a next-in-line president and a board member already, becoming president has added even more responsibility on me due to Matthew. And as for my dad, he started a new company.
I've always wanted to start a new company,
he said, pushing the presidency onto me, eager to show Matthew up. Because of that, both my father and I became busy, so John has been looking after Harlan. Apparently, John's business trip was forced upon him because Valeria was having an affair with his boss. He took early retirement and moved into a vacant apartment in our building.
I'm currently studying about remote work.
Planning to eventually entrust him with work, I've sent someone knowledgeable his way. He seems very capable, so I'd like him to excel in my new company. It seems my dad and John got along very well after this incident, often visiting each other's apartments to drink and chat. On the other hand, Matthew, having been driven out, returned to his empty family home. Unable to find employment at any bank with rumors spread by my dad and I everywhere, he was left unemployable, forced to pay me compensation through debts. Now, spending his days tirelessly working part-time jobs, he came crying to us, but we collectively ignored him. Once rumored to be on the fast track to becoming a branch manager, he has fallen far.
When I grow up, I want to be like Grandpa.
Harlan has come to respect my dad even more after this incident. Seeing him as a hero for rescuing us from the malicious acts of Matthew and Valeria. Would you take over for Grandpa someday?
Yes.
Hearing Harlan's willingness to follow in his footsteps, my dad was overjoyed. Determined not to be outdone by my father, I resolved to work even harder. Eventually, both my company and my father's company settled down.
Oh, welcome home, Mom.
Welcome back, looks like you worked hard. When I come home exhausted, I find John had already prepared dinner for us.
I helped today too. Really? That's great, Harlan. I'm looking forward to dinner.
Praising Harlan's effort with a smile, my dad also returned home late. Then, the four of us sat around the dining table, chatting and eating dinner together. In stark contrast to us, Matthew and his accomplices were scattered. Matthew piled up debts upon debts, eventually becoming indebted to a loan shark. And I heard rumors he was put on a ship. Matthew's family home was sold to pay off his debts, and Valeria, now without a place to go, was spotted living under a bridge by an acquaintance.
By the way, I received an apology letter from Alyssan's parents. They're good people, I hope you'll read it. If you say so, John.
According to the letter from Alyssan's parents, she gave birth in prison. They took the child in, and after Alyssan's release, they moved away to ensure she wouldn't rely on them. The letter contained deep apologies to me. Alyssan's parents seem like very good people. I sincerely hope the child grows up to resemble their grandparents rather than their parents. Nonetheless, Alyssan too has lost a place to return to. I hope she reflects on her sins in her solitude. Time passed by and it had been 10 years since the divorce. We've grown without being troubled by Matthew.
Did I even have a dad?
Apparently, he vaguely remembers Matthew's existence but considers irrelevant to his life. And I too have completely forgotten about his existence.
I've decided to take over Grandpa's company after all.
If that's what you've decided, I won't object. Harlan chose to inherit my dad's company, which was originally a company making toys. Starting as an ordinary employee, Harlan is valued for his constant flow of ideas.
Maybe it's time to leave the company in Harlan's hands.
My dad would say so in a laugh. Once he hands over the company to Harlan, he plans to live a quiet life in the countryside. I'm also finding a successor and teaching them my job earnestly. Once they've grown enough, I too might consider early retirement and start a new path. With that thought of future in mind, I will continue to work as the CEO.
Mom's been in an accident and taken to the hospital. Please, can you drive me there?
I pleaded with my husband, tears streaming down my face. I had just received word that my mother was in a critical condition, unconscious after a traffic accident. However, upon hearing the situation, my husband responded, "I can't, I'm off to a company trip now," bluntly refusing my desperate request. Even as I persisted, he mocked me, saying, "The trip is more important to me. Visiting someone else's mother in the hospital is a waste of time. I'm definitely not going. My name is Jane. I'm 29 years old. My husband, Ben, who is a year older than me, and I got married 2 years ago, both of us working full-time. We met in the same university club. Although the club had many members and it was hard to talk to everyone, we ended up sitting next to each other at a drinking party one day, which led to us becoming close. We also discovered that we both were only children who grew up in single-mother households after losing our fathers early, which quickly brought us closer together. We started going out more and naturally progressed to dating. When we both became comfortable in our jobs as working adults, Ben proposed. Neither of us is currently thinking about children since we're both focused on our careers. However, we do want them eventually and have talked about buying a detached house when the time comes, shortly after getting married. Currently, we're renting an apartment and live close to both of our parents' homes. Since both our fathers have passed away, our mothers, Sarah and my mother-in-law Mary, live alone but have become very good friends. Their similar experiences of not remarrying and raising a child on their own seem to click. And since our family meeting, they've developed a friendship like no other, often meeting for tea or traveling together. I never expected them to get along so well, but seeing my mother happy with Mary makes me glad they met. Mary is also very fond of me, and we have a good relationship. However, Ben isn't too thrilled that Mary seems to prioritize my mother over him. He has quite the mama's boy trait. I knew from his behavior even before we got married how much he cherished his mother, which I understood, coming from a single-mother household myself. But shortly after we started living together post-marriage, I discovered his true nature. One holiday, I received a message from my mom with a photo attached, saying she was having lunch with Mary. Having lunch with Mary now? I read the message, accompanied by a photo of the two of them smiling, which naturally brought a smile to my face too. "Hey, Ben. Looks like Mary and my mom are having lunch. Look, she sent a photo," I said, showing the image to Ben, who was at home at the time. However, his mood soured immediately upon seeing it, and he clicked his tongue in annoyance. "What's this? Some kind of spite against me? Huh? What are you talking about?" At that time, I hadn't realized Ben disliked my mother. True, Ben often didn't talk much in front of my mother, but I thought it was because we were newly married and he was just nervous. I never imagined he would resent my mother simply because she got along well with his own. Lately, every time I invite Mom out for a meal, she turns me down saying she has plans with Sarah. Doesn't your mother know the meaning of restraint? I was shocked to hear Ben think this way and speak ill of my mother. Mary, too, seemed to have realized early on that Ben disliked my mother. There was a time when we were dining out as a group, and Ben made a snide remark towards my mother, which Mary couldn't stand and scolded him. "Ben, what is this attitude towards Sarah? Enough is enough. What? You always side with this person. Haven't you always said I'm your precious son? It's not funny preferring someone you've recently become close with over your own son," Ben retorted, but I honestly found his attachment to Mary to be unnaturally strong. Later, when Ben wasn't around, Mary apologized to my mother and me. "I think I've spoiled that boy too much. I'm truly sorry. There's no need for you to worry. I'm not bothered by it either. Ben really loves you." My mother, being gentle-natured and not prone to anger, seemed to accept the situation without blame. However, I could tell right away that she was hurt inside. And Ben, without considering my mother's feelings, progressively worsened his behavior over time. Although Mary would defend my mother, preventing Ben from openly attacking her. He would complain to me whenever my mother and Mary seemed close, eventually even starting to regularly speak ill of my mother. Not long into our second year of marriage, I couldn't take it anymore and had a huge argument with Ben. After a fierce exchange of words, the fundamental issues remained unresolved. And since then, our relationship has become awkward, with less conversation than before. Lately, I've noticed Ben's been coming home late and going out alone on weekends more often. Feeling something was off, I asked him directly. "Work's been busy. Lots of overtime and working on weekends lately," he said. Despite his explanation, I couldn't shake off my feeling of unease. Then, one Sunday, when we both had the day off, I noticed Ben packing early in the morning. It seemed he wasn't going to work after all. Just as I was about to ask why he was packing, my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. Curious, I answered, only to find out it was the police. After confirming I was Sarah's daughter, the officer on the line dropped a bombshell. "Actually, Sarah has been involved in a traffic accident." My mind went blank. "Mom!" She was already taken to the hospital, in a critical condition and unconscious. After getting the hospital's name, I managed to end the call with trembling hands. Tears started to overflow as I struggled to think, but knew I had to get to the hospital. However, I don't have a driver's license, so I desperately begged Ben for a ride. "Ben, something terrible has happened. Mom's been in an accident and taken to the hospital. Please, we need to go now." But upon hearing the situation, Ben made a face of displeasure and said, "What? I'm about to leave for a company trip. I'll be late for the meetup. Deal with it yourself." Flatly refusing my request. "A company trip? Today? You never mentioned anything." I realized why he was packing, but I hadn't been informed about the trip at all. And to my shock, he mentioned the trip would last 2 weeks. "How can you think of going on a trip at a time like this? Mom might." "Enough! The trip is more important to me. Your mother is just an unrelated stranger to me. Visiting someone I hate is a waste of time, and I'm definitely not going." Ben hurled cruel words at me, scoffing. "Get out of the way. I have a plane to catch and I'm busy." He pushed past me, whistling as he packed his clothes into a suitcase. Furious, I yelled, "You're the worst! Just do whatever you want!" and left the house, hurrying to the hospital by taxi. Ben went on his trip as planned, oblivious to the crisis unfolding around me. I tried calling him multiple times over the 2 weeks, but couldn't get through. When Ben returned home in high spirits 2 weeks later, I gave him a cold look. Now I have to give Mom her souvenirs. "I wonder if Mom's doing okay," he said optimistically. Without responding, I quietly agreed to go with him to his mother's house. On the way, Ben happily talked about all the souvenirs he bought for Mary. Ben didn't say a word of concern about my mother, who had been in an accident. Upon arriving at his parents' house and trying to open the door, Ben stopped, puzzled. "Huh? Why is it locked?" It seemed unusual for the door to be locked, since Mary usually didn't lock it when she was home. "Is Mom not here?" Ben murmured. I pushed past Ben, pulled out the spare key I had for their house from my bag, and unlocked the door. "Hey! Why do you have the keys to the house?" Ben looked bewildered, but I didn't respond. Entering the house before me, Ben tilted his head in confusion upon not seeing Mary.
Doesn't something feel off?
As Ben moved towards the bedroom, I stopped him. Not that way. This way, I said, leading him to the living room, where a new portrait of the deceased Mary was displayed.
What?
Stunned, Ben began to tremble, and, half crying, rushed to the portrait, turning to me.
Hey! What's going on? What is this?
I sighed deeply, holding back my anger, and explained.
Mary passed away while you were on your trip. The funeral's already over.
Ben glared at me, furious.
Don't joke around. How can this be? Why does Mom have to die? Wasn't it your mother who was in the accident and in critical condition? If anyone was supposed to die, it should have been her.
Despite Ben's outrageously insensitive outburst, I calmly explained what happened after my mother's accident.
My mom woke up after the accident. She had a fracture and is currently undergoing rehabilitation but is gradually recovering.
Though my mother was still hospitalized, she was slowly getting better thanks to the medical staff's efforts. But Ben was unsatisfied.
Then why did Mom have to?
He asked.
It seems that on the day my mom had her accident, she was on her way to our house. She fell from a pedestrian bridge.
And I hesitated before answering.
I guess you had told Mary about going on a business trip, hadn't you? Yeah, I did mention it, but...
Mary had been suspicious of you lately.
You've been unreachable more often. She probably wanted to verify if you were really going on a business trip.
I explained, and Ben looked shocked. According to Mary a month ago, Ben used to call or message her daily, but recently, communication had almost stopped. Mary had trouble reaching him by phone, and on the rare occasions he did call back, he would quickly say he was busy and hang up. Mary thought Ben, being of a certain age, might have naturally become less dependent on his mother. However, she suspected Ben might be hiding something. With her suspicions growing, Mary decided to check if the business trip story was true. Coincidentally, around the same time, I received the call about my mother's accident. Mary, who passed away, had brought souvenirs from a day trip she took with my mother last month, intending to give them to us. That day, I was too distraught to think of anything but getting to the hospital. So I didn't have the chance to inform Mary about my mother's accident. Mary must have taken the bus to the stop closest to our apartment and then walked the rest of the way. There's a pedestrian bridge on the way, and it seems she fell while climbing it. A witness said she missed a step just before reaching the top and tumbled down. Though an ambulance was called immediately, she had hit her head hard. And that's how Mary died. After explaining this to Ben, I glared at him intensely.
After learning about Mary, I called you numerous times.
Over these 2 weeks, no matter how I tried to contact you, you never answered your phone or replied to any messages. Because there were no other relatives to take on the role, I had to act as the chief mourner at Mary's funeral. With my mother still in a critical state, I had to somehow get through Mary's funeral without her real son.
You've been ignoring all contact for 2 weeks, just out having fun, right? This has shown me exactly who you are. I'm divorcing you.
Upon declaring this, Ben collapsed to the ground, crying loudly.
How can you say that right after Mom died? Now's not the time for divorce talk, is it? I didn't contact you because I was always with my coworkers. I had no time.
As Ben sobbed and made excuses, my anger only grew.
Stop lying!
I raised my voice and pulled out a piece of paper from my bag, thrusting it in front of Ben. It was the itinerary for the company trip I found in Ben's room.
It says here the company trip was from the 12th to the 19th for 1 week. But you were gone from the 5th to the 19th. You said just before leaving it was for 2 weeks, right? So what were you doing and where were you from the 5th to the 12th?
Well, that's... I know. You were cheating, weren't you?
And you spent that week with your affair partner, right?
As I spoke with certainty, Ben, who had stopped crying, began to panic.
What are you talking about? Cheating. I took leave for the remaining week to go on a trip with friends. See, work's been busy, and I needed a break.
Fed up with Ben's continued excuses, I pulled out a mobile phone from my pocket. The moment he saw it, his face turned pale. This mobile phone belonged to Ben, found in his closet while he was away on the trip. Likely, there was another mobile phone in his bag, prepared specifically for communicating with his affair partner. Ben had previously claimed he couldn't contact me while on his trip due to lack of time. But he had left his regular mobile phone at home, making it impossible for him to notice any calls.
You've been lying through your teeth. You left this phone at home to spend time with your affair partner, didn't you?
As I placed the mobile phone in front of Ben, he began to tremble and slammed his fist on the table.
Yeah, that's right. I've been fed up with you for a long time. I've got someone else I love now.
He shouted defiantly, and then,
And how did you know where to find the mobile phone? Don't tell me you searched my room while I was away.
He yelled, which was exasperating. I looked at Mary's portrait and silently apologized to her for showing such a scene before speaking up. Mary told me. At that, Ben choked on his words. After a big fight with Ben over my mother, he started coming home late and going out alone on his supposed workdays off more often. Suspecting something was off due to his increased unavailability, I had confided in Mary. Mary, sharing her suspicions about Ben, had advised me.
Ben has had a habit since he was little of hiding things that are inconvenient for him, like bad test scores or a glass he broke that his father cherished. He's always securely hidden such things in the closet. If you find a bunch of towels there, it's likely he's hiding something among them.
After Mary passed away, I remembered her words, checked Ben's closet, and sure enough, found the mobile phone.
I can't believe Mom would tell you such a thing.
Ben was visibly distressed, not having expected Mary to doubt him. However, seeing his dismayed state didn't sway me.
I will be seeking a divorce and compensation. I'm prepared to consult a lawyer and take this to court if necessary,
I stated firmly, conveying my resolve. Ben groaned but, realizing he had no way out, reluctantly agreed. Afterwards, we properly divided our assets, and the divorce was finalized. However, the following month, just as I was settling into my new life, I received a call from Ben. Reluctantly answering, I heard Ben plead.
Jane, please, I need your help. What's the matter, exactly?
He explained he was in trouble at work after they found out about Mary's funeral. Since Mary had been listed as Ben's dependent, her death and the necessity of returning her insurance card to the company meant that her death was only then reported to the company, revealing that the funeral had taken place during the company trip. Ben was seen as a disrespectful son who didn't attend his own mother's funeral or even show up, garnering cold looks from his colleagues at work. Yet, Ben lied there too, shifting the blame by claiming I hadn't informed him about Mary's funeral. However, hastily sharing different stories with different people only made things worse. His inconsistencies and contradictions eventually unraveled, revealing his lies. Already viewed as inconsiderate, his repeated dishonesty led to doubts about his character, resulting in his isolation and eventual resignation to escape the situation. Now, without income, Ben is living off Mary's inheritance back at his parents' house. but the fact I didn't attend the funeral is known throughout neighborhood, making me feel ostracized. So, I thought about selling the house, but that's proving difficult. Ben is now recognized by the neighbors as the worst son, feeling awkward even just walking outside. He had planned to sell the family home quickly, but due to its age, there is a lack of interest from buyers. I'm really struggling right now. So Jane, let's start over. Remarry me and let's live together. Hearing this, I was disgusted. He was only reaching out because his situation had worsened.
Don't be ridiculous. I've had enough of you. I will never remarry you. Please. I can't go on like this. I don't care about you anymore. You should just live with your affair partner.
Rejecting him outright, Ben started to falter.
No, we've already broken up.
Apparently, the affair partner learned about Mary's funeral and, subsequently, that she was the other woman. Ben had hidden his marital status, leading to her anger and their breakup, leaving him alone. It's your fault. I don't want to be with someone like you. Goodbye. As I was about to hang up.
Wait! If you won't agree to remarry, I'll come to your house and argue in person. You're at your parents' place, right?
Ben threatened. But I'm not. I immediately responded.
Where are you then?
I won't tell you. Also, I've recently changed jobs, so lying in wait at my old company is useless. I've already asked everyone to call the police if you show up after my resignation. I decided to sell my parents' house to distance myself from Ben, despite the low likelihood of finding a buyer due to its age. So with my mother's consent, we sold the land after demolishing the house. My mother, having recently been discharged from the hospital, is deeply saddened by the loss of her close friend, Mary. Thus, we moved to a quiet place to live together. And I switched jobs accordingly.
Then at least tell me where you are. After all, I've received care from your mother, and I want to visit her.
Ben was desperate to find out where I was, but his words only infuriated me. And I was surprised by how cold my response was.
Received care? After you've been nothing but trouble for Mom. Don't start saying convenient things now. Besides, Mom has said she never wants to see you again. What? Wait a minute. Jane.
Ben was still trying to say something, but I mercilessly ended the call. I then blocked his number and changed mine a few days later. Later, I found out that Ben was being sued for compensation by the affair partner he deceived. And he was in a dire situation, unable to borrow money due to lack of employment. He's been doing day labor and part-time jobs while searching for full-time work. My mother and I have started a new life in a new place. Relieved to have cut ties with Ben and reminiscing about Mary without stress. Mom couldn't attend Mary's funeral, nor has she been able to visit Mary's grave since her hospital stay and the move have kept us busy. It seems she hasn't fully accepted Mary's death, often crying while looking at photos and videos of them together.
I really want to visit Mary soon,
she said sadly, so I replied, yes, we should visit her grave soon, planning to ensure we don't accidentally encounter Ben. I'm looking forward to making our new life in this new place fulfilling while supporting my mother. On the day we celebrated the 50th wedding anniversary of my in-laws, I arrived late and pulled along my son to introduce him to my sister-in-law, Abigail. This is my son, Mark. Mark, say hello.
I'm Mark. I'm 5 years old.
Mark clung to me and looked at Abigail, shyly greeting her.
Abigail, as I mentioned in my letter, my son has a congenital disability.
Before I could finish, Abigail blurted out,
What a monster! Don't let it spread to my kids.
In that moment, both Mark and I froze as if time had stopped. Abigail's husband didn't say anything, but his look of discomfort was evident, clearly wanting to keep his distance. Kevin and the in-laws were speechless and rigid. I couldn't believe what was being said to such a young child, filled with disbelief. Not knowing what to say to the insensitive remarks of Abigail and her company, I stood there motionless until I heard a voice from beside me. "Do people hate me again?" Mark looked down, desperately trying to hold back tears. Such words would hurt an adult, let alone a child.
It's not contagious. He has albinism, which just means he was born with less pigment. It's still a disease, it can spread. Scarlett, get rid of that ugly kid fast. Get out.
My husband was trembling with anger. During the heated argument, tears fell from Mark's eyes. Interrupting Kevin, who seemed ready to confront Abigail, my father-in-law Robert spoke up.
"Yes, don't ever come back."
The relief was visible on Abigail and her husband's faces. They smiled triumphantly as if they had found someone who understood them. But their smiles quickly turned to surprise.
"What? Dad, what are you doing?"
My name is Harper, a 40-year-old housewife living with my husband, Kevin, and our son, Mark. Only 5 years ago, the thought of living happily as a family of 3 was unimaginable. Kevin and I had always wanted children but were unable to conceive. I desperately wanted a child, and so did Kevin, which led us to seek fertility treatments at a hospital. There were days when it was hard to see pregnant women in the waiting room, reminding me that children are a gift. Despite careful diet and health management, I often wondered why I couldn't have a child, leading to days filled with self-loathing. The fertility treatments were not only emotionally taxing but also a financial burden, leading to many tearful nights. During those times, the person who was always there to support me was none other than Kevin. His encouragement, holding my hand, and accompanying me to the hospital were incredibly reassuring. "It's okay, I'm sure our baby is just waiting for the right time to come to us." Miraculously, his words gave me hope, and I became more positive. The following year, our efforts paid off, and I became pregnant. We sharing the news with my in-laws Robert and Chloe, who were overjoyed. The baby grew healthy inside me, and we looked forward to the delivery day. On the day of birth, hearing the lively cries, I was deeply relieved and eagerly wished to see the baby's face. Yet, the child born had skin and hair so white and delicate, it seemed touching could break them, like an angel. Needless to say, Kevin and I were astonished. We were confused, as no one in our families had such an appearance.
"Why?"
The doctor explained our child had oculocutaneous albinism, a congenital condition known as albinism.
Albinism? The one that happens to 1 in 20,000 people.
It's a disease associated not just with physical appearance but also vision problems and sensitivity to sunlight. I regretted not being able to give birth to a normal child after fertility treatments. However, seeing the baby, all that faded away, and we embraced our child fully.
It doesn't matter if it's a rare disease. Our child is as beautiful and precious as an angel.
Exactly. This child chose us. Thank you, thank you. Thus, Kevin and I accepted our long-awaited baby positively and with hope. We named the child Mark and decided to raise him with love. Introducing him as our angel to the in-laws, they were initially surprised, but eventually warmed up to Mark's innocent smile. "It might be hard, but you two will surely overcome everything. If you ever need help, we're here for you." The in-laws accepted and promised to love and care for him together. Mark's main concerns were managing sunlight exposure and weak vision. When going outside, sunscreen is essential, and Mark also needs assistive devices for his vision. However, now, thanks to the internet, connecting with friends who share the same concerns has lessened the feeling of struggling alone. There are several considerations in Mark's life, but otherwise, he's a healthy and mischievous boy. Kevin and I are delighted to see Mark increasingly doing things on his own. And before we knew it, 4-5 years had flown by. During this time, we visited the in-laws' house for Christmas, long weekends, and whenever the timing was right. The in-laws live about a 10-minute bus ride away, and from the station. Robert always picks us up in his car, mindful of Mark's condition. Thank you for always picking us up.
No problem. I always can't wait to see my grandson.
Once in the car, Mark always brightened up. Certainly, he liked cars, but there was a more pressing issue for him. The stares from others. When on the bus, some people would gawk or recoil at Mark's appearance, whispering or turning away. There were even times when people pointed their phone cameras at him, leading us to ask them to stop and shielding Mark from their view. Such actions deeply saddened me as a mother and sometimes made me angry, wondering why they would do such things. Affected by these stares, Mark would shrink into himself on the bus. Especially since turning 5, he would hide behind me or Kevin, or cling to Robert and Chloe, curling up small. Thinking how hard it must be for Mark himself tightened my chest with pain. One night, before bed, Mark asked, "Mom, Dad, am I weird? Does everyone dislike me? Why would you think that?" I replied, "Because, in the train, everyone looks at me so much." Hearing Mark express his feelings was heart-wrenching, and I've never felt more distressed. Kevin seemed troubled too, his brows slightly furrowed. I pulled Mark close, looked him in the eyes, and assured him, "You're not weird, and nobody dislikes you. Even if people look, you can hold your head high." With tears welling up in his eyes, he listened to my words and simply replied, "Okay, I understand. Mark, how about you sleep with Dad tonight?"
Okay. Read me a story?
Excited, Kevin headed to the bedroom with Mark. Watching them, I stayed in the living room, sighing.
The 50th anniversary celebration for Robert and Chloe is coming up, and I'm a bit worried.
At kindergarten, there are teachers to support and friends who are told about Mark's condition, which offers some comfort, but public places are a different story. Struggling with this challenge, Mark, Kevin, and I were all searching for solutions, discussing with friends as well. Recently, Kevin brought up the 50th wedding anniversary celebration of the in-laws. Abigail, my sister-in-law living far away, would be coming, and it was suggested we celebrate grandly with her family.
Mark hasn't met Abigail yet. It might be a good opportunity, don't you think, Scarlett? Abigail too?
Truthfully, I didn't have the best impression of Abigail, my sister-in-law. Her family moves often due to her husband's job, and I've only met them once or twice. When Mark was born, I sent a letter but received no reply. Worried they didn't care about our family, I felt anxious about introducing Mark. When I shared my concerns, Kevin reassured me with a smile, "It'll be okay.
Abigail isn't that bad, and her husband has always been nice to me." "Okay,"
I conceded, perhaps overly concerned about others' judgments. Maybe Abigail and her husband are genuinely kind, and the lack of response to my letter was just due to their circumstances. If they're coming all this way to celebrate their parents' 50th anniversary, we shouldn't dismiss their intent. While I could handle any comments about me, I worried whether Mark would be accepted or subjected to stares like on the bus. But we agreed to include Abigail's family. And so, with lingering anxiety, we approached the day of the 50th anniversary celebration. Due to flight schedules, Abigail's family would arrive later. For this special day, instead of Robert's car, Kevin and I escorted the in-laws to a high-end restaurant. Because we had a reservation, I said, "I'm Harper," and the receptionist led us to our room. Robert and Chloe, smiling happily, held Mark's hand as they walked to their seats. The stylish space, fitting about 10 people, was lit with soft lighting, creating a calm atmosphere. "Grandpa and Grandma are happy." "I'm happy too." "Yes, Mark is happy too." Mark seemed to understand today was special, smiling more than usual. He was dressed in new clothes bought for the occasion, looking even cuter, which made the staff lady smile. After some time chatting, Abigail's family arrived late. They appeared in formal attire, and Scarlett, Mark's cousin, was also dressed in a cute outfit. "Sorry we're late." "Dad, Mom, congratulations today." Abigail dropped her bag and greeted Robert and Chloe. Of course, Abigail's husband and Scarlett smiled and said, "Congratulations." When they settled, I nervously greeted Abigail's family. Abigail, long time no see." "Thank you for coming all this way today." "Ah, right." However, she responded indifferently, as if she barely knew me. Gathering my courage, I brought Mark over to introduce him.
This is my son, Mark." "Say hello, Mark." "I'm Mark, 5 years old."
Mark clung to me and shyly greeted Abigail.
"Abigail, as I mentioned in my letter, my son has a congenital disability."
Before I could finish, Abigail bluntly said,
"EW, what a monster. Don't let it spread to us."
Instantly, Mark and I froze as if time had stopped. Abigail's husband, without saying a word, clearly looked uncomfortable, clearly wanting to keep his distance. Kevin and the in-laws were speechless and stiff. I was filled with disbelief at what was said to such a young child. Not knowing what to say to the inconsiderate Abigail, I stood there motionless, but then I was brought back to reality by a voice from beside me. "Do people hate me again?" Mark looked anxious, holding my hand. Laughing, Abigail said,
"Yeah, nobody wants to see your face."
Mark looked down, trying hard not to cry. Such words would hurt an adult, let alone a child. I thought about slapping Abigail right there, but hugged Mark tightly instead.
"What are you saying, Abigail? That's not true." "That's right." "Abigail, how could you say that?"
Chloe hugged me and Mark in defense.
"EW, what?" "Mom, you're defending that monster?" "It's gross, like, it's all white and has white hair. Is it contagious?" "Get it away if it's going to spread." "It's not contagious. It doesn't spread. He has albinism, a condition of being born with less pigment. So, it is a disease. It could spread." "Why did you bring him?" "Stay away." "Scarlett, stay back." "Abigail, don't say that. Mark is not a monster, nor is it contagious. Don't treat him like that." "Kevin, is that really your child?" "Unbelievable. Why can't you be more considerate, Abigail? Just get rid of that ugly kid, fast. Get out."
Kevin's hands trembled with anger. During the heated argument, tears streamed down Mark's face. Intervening before Kevin could confront Abigail, Robert spoke up.
"Yes, don't ever come back."
Only Abigail and her husband were relieved by those words. Their faces wore a triumphant look, as if to say they have found an ally. But that smile quickly vanished, turning into a look of surprise.
"What? Dad, what are you doing?"
Robert had grabbed Abigail and her husband's bags and threw them out of the room. Then, after clapping his hands together, he turned back to the astonished couple.
"To treat a polite child who greeted you upon meeting for the first time like this. That's not my daughter. You are the monsters. I don't want to see such ugly faces. But Dad, what if you and Mom catch it? I'm worried. No need to worry. If you had the heart to worry about me, you could have considered Mark's feelings too. Why didn't you? No, come on, that's just not normal, no matter how you look at it. Stop saying such heartless things. Get out now.
Abigail's couple was taken aback by Robert's demeanor, unseen by Kevin and me before. They seemed to want to say something more, but then a voice exclaimed, "Stop it." All eyes, including Kevin's, turned to the source. Surprisingly, it was Scarlett, dressed in her cute outfit. Her cheeks flushed.
Albinism isn't contagious, and he's not a monster. Why would you say that? Dad and Mom, that's awful.
She declared this with all her might, tears streaming down her face. That alone showed she was angry and hurt for Mark, which made me incredibly happy. Yet, Abigail harshly responded to her daughter.
Scarlett, be quiet. You don't know anything. You're the one who doesn't know anything, Mom. I'm so embarrassed right now. Hating Mark without even trying to understand him. I hate you too.
Scarlett's almost shouting voice turned Abigail and her husband pale. Undeterred, Scarlett ran to Mark, towering slightly like an older sister, and gently stroked his head. Don't cry. You should smile. You're not a monster, and you're not disliked. The people who say that are wrong. Okay. Both Scarlett and Mark's faces were smeared with tears and runny noses. It was difficult to get Abigail and her husband to understand Mark, but Scarlett was different, which was reassuring. Seeing Scarlett approach Mark and pat his head, Abigail seemed to snap out of it, hastily leaving with her husband without a word. The commotion drew the attention of other patrons outside, likely making Abigail's family feel unwelcome. While some staff members asked patrons to return to their seats, we resumed our conversation as if nothing had happened. The rest of the meal went smoothly, without tears or derogatory words, marking a peaceful time. After the 50th wedding anniversary celebration ended, and we returned to our usual lives, I was struck by a question. How did Scarlett know about albinism?
Kevin, did you talk to her on the phone? No, I haven't. I thought you had told her, Harper.
Wondering how she knew about Mark without us telling her, we received a letter. The sender was Scarlett, who had apparently gotten our address from Robert and Chloe. The letter, written on cute heart pattern stationery like that of a young girl, contained her earnest words. After dinner that day, we decided to read the letter together. The letter began with "To Mark's mom and dad," sharing Scarlett's personal thoughts on people with albinism. Scarlett, due to her parents' moves, had changed schools several times, about 3 in total. At one of her previous schools, there was a child with albinism similar to Mark. This child had white hair and wore special glasses for poor vision. But after the teacher's explanation, all classmates respected and treated the child well. And Scarlett liked that child. Without discrimination against anyone, not minding their own disability. And being kind to everyone, she found them genuinely cool and fell for them. Even with poor eyesight, they had great hearing, were good at singing, and could play the piano. I wanted to be as kind as them, but Mom was different. On a day when parents gathered, seeing the albino child with Scarlett, Abigail frowned immediately.
Scarlett, who's that child? Dyeing hair in elementary school? And those ugly glasses don't suit at all. You shouldn't play with that child, okay? Understand?
Saying so, she complained. Scarlett was filled with disbelief and felt very upset. Shocked and frustrated at her inability to retort her mother's heartless words. So, I felt relieved when I could finally speak up about Mark. Reading the letter made me feel warm, realizing Scarlett had been harboring those feelings during the 50th wedding anniversary celebration. Later, Scarlett settled in her current school and, driven by a desire to be understood, read an essay on albino awareness during an open class.
My parents labeled my cousin a monster without trying to understand albinism. I think those who say such things have monstrous hearts.
I hope more people understand albinism and refrain from saying terrible things like my parents did. I wish for a class where everyone respects each other as they did at my previous school. The composition she read on open day, advocating for mutual respect, was highly praised. At the same time, Abigail and her husband faced condemning stares and were embarrassed. Following that open day, they were viewed coldly by other parents in the neighborhood, and Scarlett was scolded by Abigail. But she seemed unfazed, hoping to grow up to be someone who can eloquently explain and support people with albinism. Please be kind and stand tall, Mark. I'll do my best too. See you. The letter ended with this message, accompanied by a cartoon character sticker that seemed like it could come from a girl's magazine, saying your ally. Of course, Mark still can't read well, nor does he fully understand the meaning of the words. But when I carefully explained how to read it, Mark, with a happy smile, excitedly shouted, "Ally, ally." Seeing this made both Kevin and I happy, and we all ended up laughing together. In fact, since the day of the 50th wedding anniversary celebration, Mark, perhaps remembering Scarlett's words, has always stood tall, never shrinking, whether on the bus or at kindergarten. What kind of mental change occurred, I'm not sure, but it seems Mark has understood Scarlett's words in his own way. When going to meet the in-laws, as usual, we got on the bus and sat down. Some high school girls who seemed to have finished school early were talking about Mark, covering their mouths but their eyes laughing. What's that? White hair. I was considering changing seats, but then I noticed Mark had also seen the girls and was staring back at them. Mark? When I called out to him, Mark, still looking at the high school girls, smiled back at them. Surprised, perhaps, the girls moved away, flustered. There were other times when we were talked about or stared at, but Mark began to smile back each time. The speakers would feel guilty, stopping their gossip and diverting their attention to their phones. It seems to be Mark's own way of handling situations, though I wondered where he learned such diplomacy. But upon reflection, Scarlett had encouraged him that day, "Don't cry, just smile." Those words must have resonated with Mark. It's not that there are no more people who mock or stare or demean based on appearance. In fact, we'll likely encounter more such people. Seeing Mark not just protected by me, his mom, but protecting himself, made me feel incredibly proud of his growth. Our child is striving to live with strength. Maybe it's thanks to Scarlett. I often think, if only there were more kind-hearted children like Scarlett. Discussing this with friends, I found support among other moms, leading to small educational gatherings in public spaces. If both those directly involved and those around them can understand each other, surely we can connect kind-hearted people and create a slightly kinder world than today. I hope for a world where more people, like Scarlett, understand and treat those with disabilities without discrimination, making it a better place for Mark to live positively.
Sucking up to your grandkid is creepy. Pensioners like you should only show up at weddings or funerals.
It happened on my adorable grandson's 4th birthday. My son's wife, in other words, my daughter-in-law, said so disdainfully and nonchalantly, "I just planned a dinner party to celebrate my only grandchild's birthday." Amidst that, my daughter-in-law, who has always disliked me, finally showed her true colors in front of her son. If that's what she wants, I'll gladly cut ties. Are you sure? Don't come back regretting it later. I said with a smile, revealing a certain truth to her. I am Harper, 65 years old. Recently, my husband passed away. He just turned 75 last month. He had been suffering from a chronic illness and was given a limited time to live a few years ago. Despite that, he stayed by my side for 2 years longer than the doctors predicted. I am sad that my beloved husband is no longer with me, but I am truly grateful for his efforts until the end. Thankfully, I inherited several properties from my father, so I had rental income. Even when my husband couldn't work due to his illness, we could live comfortably because of that income. Besides, even after his death, there's another reason I can live normally. That is the existence of our 2 sons. We have the eldest son Andrew, and the younger Robert. Both are married, and Andrew has a 4-year-old son, David. The fact that my sons live relatively close eases my loneliness. With my husband's funeral over, life is slowly returning to normal. One day, Andrew and his wife Madison came to visit my house. This house is also Andrew's childhood home, but he rarely visits, so I asked him what was up. What's going on? You didn't even call. I'm sorting Dad's things, and the living room's a mess. We need to talk about something important with you. It's okay if it's messy. I just want to welcome you guys properly. Oh, where's David? He's at kindergarten, so it's fine. We're coming in. Although I tried to stop them, they proceeded down the hallway. Following Andrew, Madison silently tagged along. I followed them to the living room. They were already deeply seated on the sofa, with Madison fiddling with her mobile phone, legs crossed. I wonder what this talk is about. Madison seems as grumpy as ever today. I hope it's nothing too serious. I've never had a good impression of Madison since the beginning of their marriage. She's beautiful and has a great figure, but completely lacks charm. Even my husband had a troubled look when she came to greet us for their wedding. Our relationship has been far from good. I was worried for reasons like those. I was surprised when Andrew broke the silence. Mom, I want to be clear about this. Why don't you live with us? Live together? I was taken aback by his unexpected proposal. Sensing something from my expression, he hastily explained. I know, it's shocking to hear all of a sudden. But I've been worried, Mom. Ever since Dad died, I thought you might be lonely. Well, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't lonely. Right? You're getting older, and living with us would be safer. You'd feel more secure with us around, right? That's true, but you guys have your own life, right? Interrupting me, he said with a broad smile. It's okay, no worries. He then took my hand and continued happily. Mom, Madison agrees with moving in together. Madison does? Actually, it was Madison who first suggested we live together. Really? Madison suggested living together? Given her attitude so far, it seemed like she didn't like me at all. Or maybe she's just not good at expressing herself? Various questions crossed my mind, but I was genuinely curious about her feelings. I turned to her and asked tentatively, Madison. Andrew said so, but is it true that you suggested we live together? It's true. I thought you might be lonely on your own. Is that so? Thank you. We thought living together would make David happy too. Don't read too much into it, okay? Though her tone was brisk, it didn't seem malicious. From the way the conversation was going, it appeared true that she suggested living together. Afterward, they kept persuading me. We're worried, so we'd like to move in with you as soon as possible. I was surprised by the sudden proposal, but since they insisted, I agreed to live together. We continued our conversation as they led, and finally decided to start living together the following week. Once the moving day was decided, they left briskly. Alone in the room, I resumed sorting my husband's belongings. While looking at family trip photos from years ago, I got lost in thought. I decided on the spot to live together, but was it really the right choice? Madison said that, but adding 3 people suddenly to this house, where it was just my husband and me. But living together with Andrew's family, that's a happy thing, right? I tried to convince myself that my choice wasn't wrong, though it felt almost forced. Despite my anxieties, I decided to shift my mindset toward living together. A week later, the day of their move was busy from the morning. The movers arrived while I was eating lunch, as they hadn't informed me of the time. In a rush to help with the moving, Andrew and the others were nowhere to be seen. In the end, I had to direct the movers on my own. Several hours later, they finally arrived. I wish you had told me if you were going to be late. I told Andrew, but Madison retorted before he could. Excuse me, but unlike you, we're busy, you know? You're always home and has time to spare, so be a little flexible. But there was so much stuff. It was really hard to direct the movers alone. We're offering to live with you, and you complain about this? Harper, you don't realize how lucky you are. I didn't mean. Whatever, we're tired, so please get dinner ready. Saying that, she lay on the living room sofa and started playing games. Her drastic change from her usual quiet demeanor left me stunned. Confused, I approached Andrew and asked in a low voice, Andrew, Madison suggested living together, right? Because she was worried about me being alone.
Yeah, that's right. That's why we moved in early.
But what she just said, you heard it too, right? It doesn't sound like she's worried about me.
Just let it go. Mom, don't do anything unnecessary. Just listen to what Madison says and do what you want.
Andrew. He wouldn't even make eye contact. At that moment, I began to feel uneasy. 2 weeks after we started living together, my fears soon became a reality. My conversations with Andrew, who had said he was worried, were minimal. Madison had quit her part-time job, which she had held until the move. Becoming a housewife didn't mean she helped with housework. She just lazed around the house every day, not even touching the laundry. From grocery shopping to cooking, to cleaning every room, everything was left to me. Even if I asked Andrew, he wouldn't say anything to her, perhaps afraid of being disliked. So, I decided to speak up to her directly. Madison, I hate to ask, but could you at least take care of your own things and help out with the housework? What? Harper, are you ordering me around? It's not an order. It's just that the current situation is too much for me. I don't care. Aren't you grateful that we're living with you? Just so you know, Harper, you are lucky. You should be aware of that. She dismissed my words mockingly, not taking them seriously. At a loss for words, she added one more thing. Oh, by the way, David's birthday is coming up, so please book a nice restaurant. No casual eateries or anything like that. Madison, you just want to use me for your convenience. What are you talking about? It's for David. You should be happy to celebrate your grandson's birthday, right? But still. Anyway, please do it. If you don't make a reservation, I'll tell David it's his grandmother's fault. How could you? With those threatening words, she laughed with a sarcastic smile. And she left the living room, looking down on me. What's going on? Wanting to live together because they're worried, that was a lie. She just wants to use me. Using David as a threat is unbelievable. A rebellious spirit grew within me against her. But thinking of David, I couldn't put my feelings first. Reluctantly, I decided to book a certain restaurant for my dear grandson. The restaurant was one of the properties I had inherited from my father. When I signed the contract, I was made the nominal owner at the suggestion of the restaurant. I called the restaurant and explained the situation, and they agreed to open a private room. I just want to have a wonderful time with everyone for my grandson's birthday. With that thought, I buried my complex feelings towards Madison deep in my heart. A month later, David's birthday arrived. Andrew, Madison, David, and I went to the reserved restaurant. We were shown to a private room and handed menus. Seeing the prices listed, Andrew and Madison exchanged surprised looks. Apparently, since they had never been to such a place, they started to complain quietly. It's too expensive. This price is ridiculous. Indeed, that restaurant was on the pricey side but offers quality to match. However, it was not just for adults. They also had delicious dishes that children could enjoy. I was sure David will be delighted. Thinking so, I had reserved a birthday cake over the phone. I smiled at David, who was fidgeting excitedly. "David, today is your birthday, so you can order whatever you like."
Really, Grandma? Can I?
"Of course. They have your favorite hamburgers and gratin. Pick whatever you like."
Yay! Thanks, Grandma.
His unclouded smile instantly purified my heart. On the other hand, his parents were glaring at me the whole time. When it comes to ordering, they chose the cheapest pasta. When I asked if that was all they wanted, they nodded reluctantly. I wanted them to enjoy something delicious, so I selected some of my recommended dishes like appetizers, salads, carpaccio, and a meat main course. As I ordered, they looked at me incredulously, probably thinking they had to pay. In fact, I had been only asked by Madison to reserve the place. But wanting to treat everyone to that restaurant's food, I had no intention of making them pay. I just wanted my grandson to enjoy delicious food and have a happy time on his birthday. When I use the restaurant, I don't pay the bill. Instead, the amount I spend on meals is deducted from the monthly rent. No need to worry about money. With that thought, we waited for the food to arrive. During that time, Andrew and Madison hardly spoke, just whispering to each other. Usually, Madison interrupts, so I took that chance to fully enjoy my time with David. Several hours later, the meal ended, and finally, the cake was brought in. At the sight of the impressive cake, David exclaimed in delight,
"Wow!"
In contrast to my joyful grandson, his parents wore bitter expressions. Thinking that their mood was ruining the birthday party, I called the waiter and ordered a dessert platter for the adults. Hearing that, Madison burst out with her face turning red.
Hey! Can you stop ordering whatever you want? You're just going to make us pay, right?
"What are you talking about? I never intended."
Shut up. I saw earlier you didn't bring your usual wallet. I was foolish to ask an old lady like you. I can't believe you reserved such an expensive restaurant.
"Madison, please, that's rude to the restaurant. Don't worry about the bill. And David is so happy."
Sucking up to your grandkid is creepy. Pensioners like you should only show up at weddings or funerals.
That was when I first realized the immense anger was growing within me. I asked the waiter to take David out of the private room. Facing Andrew and Madison, I spoke in the coldest tone possible.
"Enough. How can you say such things without any remorse? Suddenly moving in, not doing housework, not contributing financially. And now you tell me to not get involved? This is no joke." What? It's because you reserve this place. Ordering expensive items. You're just trying to get back at us, right? This is my restaurant, you know? What? This is one of the properties I inherited from my father. I became the owner just in name when I signed the contract. The chef was grateful to him.
As I explained, Andrew's face turned pale. By the time I finished, he was in shock. Meanwhile, realizing she wouldn't have to pay, Madison spoke up loudly.
"Oh. So we don't have to pay? Because it's your treat."
"Yes, it is. But this will be the last time."
Huh?
Her face froze at my words. I made it clear to her. I'm fed up with living with a couple like you. I won't take care of you anymore. I don't even want to breathe the same air. I was foolish to be deceived by your words about being worried. Don't ever involve me in your lives again."
Wait, Harper, what are you talking about?
I'm grateful you gave birth to David. But this is my limit. I won't have anything to do with you guys, even at weddings or funerals. Don't contact me, no matter what. You guys are no longer my son or daughter." The two of them teared up. I quickly gathered my things, breathing heavily. As I was leaving, David asked with looking puzzled.
"Grandma, are you leaving?"
I'm sorry, David. We might not meet again, but take care.
Really? I don't want to not see you.
Thank you. Grandma will always pray for your happiness. While I saw him look sad, I stroked his head and left the restaurant. I didn't look back, afraid my resolve would waver. Later, I called my younger son Robert and explained everything. He was furious with Andrew, and advised me to end the cohabitation immediately. Upon arriving home, I packed the essentials and headed to Robert's house. They offered to let me stay until I found a new place. A few days later, I decided to sell the family home. It was sad to let go of the house full of memories with my husband, but I didn't want to leave Andrew's family free rein anymore. The house was quickly sold, and they were soon to be evicted. Without me bearing the living expenses, their life changed drastically. Although they managed to move into another place, apparently, they constantly fought over money. Robert received requests for help but blocked Andrew's number, knowing the situation. The only regret I had was David, but it was a fitting outcome for them. As for me, I'm enjoying a peaceful life in my new house. Robert's family visits me regularly, so I don't feel lonely. I plan to enjoy my independent life while I'm still physically able.